What's up, folks? Bear with me just a second. I got to hit a button. What's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we think about things, we contemplate them, we turn them over in our minds, and we discuss them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. My countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." Now, we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We're going to talk about it. Today is Free for All Friday. Diana Harden says, "Happy Friday, Tony. How's the Brewer family?" We're doing really well. We woke up to about another foot of snow on the ground. It's very Canadian. I know the folks down in Florida that got 10 inches were just flabbergasted. We passed 10 inches a long time ago. Now, understand, we're used to it, though. You know, you get it in Florida. If you get a few inches in Florida, that's crazy. That's like getting a few feet somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, we're doing well. I got to get out here and about in a little bit and run some errands in this snow. But it's okay. We like it. The snow doesn't really slow us down up here any. That we've got the infrastructure to deal with it, because we deal with it enough. Good morning, Terry Crooks. It's absolutely good to see you. So as folks start rolling in, I want to share with you, and these guys, I don't think they watch this program, but I play this game called Elden Ring with them, and we've been really, just every time we get on a live chat, on a voice chat rather, it always goes to philosophy and religion. And I'm cautious because, I play that video game kind of as an escape. Not that I want to escape Christianity, but I want to be cognizant that other people play it for an escape as well. And so they wouldn't want to come into a video chat on a PlayStation game and it be a Sunday school lesson. But they always ask and they always bring it up. And I talk to them a whole lot about the Norse mythology. And just to give you a definition of terms, in academia, the proper term is mythology. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's a mythos. So you'll hear people in the philosophy department, they'll talk about the mythos of a particular culture. Of the mythos of Christianity, the mythos of the Norse religion, the mythos of the Greeks. All that means is every group of people that have ever lived has had a religion, has had myths to help explain the cosmos. Henry Cavill, it's good to see you. So we were able to discuss this, and I was able to do it from the vantage point of your mythos is just as valid and reasonable as mine. Now, I don't believe that to be true. And I'm upfront with them. I told them that. I say, I believe with all my heart that I'm right and you're wrong. I don't believe there's a need to have a falling out about it, because if you're right and I'm wrong, I'll never know it. And if I'm right and you're wrong, there's absolutely nothing that I can do about it. Why fight about it? As long as you're respectful, as long as I'm respectful, and as long as we're transparent, then we can have honest conversations. So, what in the world am I getting at? I have never met someone who is a professed, these guys didn't know the name, didn't know the word, but what they were professing to be was henotheist. Now, you've heard of atheist, you've heard of agnostics. They are not atheistic, they are not agnostic. They are also not monotheistic. In other words, they don't think there's only one God in existence. They think that all of the pantheon of gods that humanity has ever contrived is existential. Like Zeus is somewhere, Odin is somewhere, I can't, the Hindu gods. Shiva is somewhere. Ra, Egyptian, is somewhere. And Jehovah God, their conceptualization of Jehovah God, because we talked a little bit about the ontological argument for the existence of God, and that's the argument from category. Deity, Jehovah God is the supreme. He is the supreme, the superlative in every perceived and conceived scenario or reality that you can think of. Even if the multiverse theory was true, Jehovah God would still be the supreme, because he is outside of that system. He is the originator of that system. He's the uncaused first cause. And that's the cosmological argument for the existence of God. And these guys didn't know that argument, but they actually argued it. Because they said, yeah, Jehovah God has to set up above every one of them, because Jehovah God, like somebody, every pantheon has a beginning and an end. The Norse mythology has a beginning and an end. The Greek mythology has a beginning and an end. The gods in the pantheon of the Hindu religions, they all have beginnings and ends. They're not eternal. Jehovah God is eternal, so they conceptualize Jehovah God as being above these other gods, because he's the uncaused first cause from whence all of these other gods proceeded. So you recognize the supremacy of a Jehovah God, and you recognize the lesser gods. So you believe in a capital G God and a lowercase g God. Yes. I said, do you mind if I put something in this conversation pot that y'all can take out? Y'all put a lot in it that I can take out, and I really enjoy it. I conceptualize conversation with one side put stuff in the pot and the other side put stuff in the pot, and then both sides take from that pot. That's how a conversation works. Well, they had put a button down. The conversation we had last, I put everything in the pot and they took it out. So this time, for about an hour, I just listened to them and I asked questions because I was very curious. And then I walked down this idea of henotheism. And when I explained what henotheism is, they said, yes. Yeah, that describes us. So let me go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and I'm going to read where Paul talks about henotheism. And then I'm going to give you a definition of what henotheism is. It's not 1 Corinthians chapter 10. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 8. My bad. All right. Now, concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And that's a clever way of saying knowledge will puff up. Knowledge can make you prideful, but love can actually build you up, make you better than what you are now. Thank you, Adelina Swift. Thank you very much, Sonya Delman. And, thank you so much. Incidentally, I'm not going to wait to the end to take your questions, comments, and observations. If you have questions, comments, and observations, by all means, put them in the chat. This is Free for All Friday. If you've got a question, it doesn't even have to be related to anything we're discussing. This is a wide open, no holds barred live stream. So thank you so much. And incidentally, we would love for you to, wherever you're watching, like, subscribe, and share. And I'm going to tell you, we are going to focus on Rumble. I've been rewarded for uploading a video on Rumble. I am already monetized on Rumble, and the video that I uploaded yesterday has already made money. Rumble has already paid the brand money. Now, it's only very little bit, but you got to start somewhere. At one time, Jeff Bezos was broke. He's not no more. And we ain't trying to do this to get rich, but you understand you can't do stuff without money. All right. So I'm gonna bring out this idea of henotheism. Now, concerning the things offered to idols, we know that all have knowledge. So everybody has knowledge, but you can be prideful because of that knowledge. But if you have love, you can be edified. That's what Paul was saying. Verse 2. If anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. That's just the way of Paul saying, look, if you think you know something, if you think you're smart, you don't really know anything. Leastwise, you don't know anything you should know. All right. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. So if you love God, that's a test of fellowship. All right? You're known of God if you love God. Therefore, so because of what I just said, concerning the eating of the things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. So that's Paul disseminating the truth. The truth is there's only one God. There is no other God but the one God. We know that to be true, but not everybody has this knowledge. This is beautiful. There were Christians who did not believe in the singularity of deity. They believed that Jehovah God was superior and that you must follow him and worship him and let him guide you and submit to his will. But they did not believe that he was exclusively existential in nature. They understood that statue of Zeus in the temple, while it wasn't Zeus, that was representative of Zeus sitting on a mountain somewhere. That's what they believed. That's why they had such an issue of conscience if a Christian went into the temple and ate this meat that was offered to idols, even though that Christian knows that there's nothing special about this meat, that it was offered to idols. So the person that doesn't have the same understanding as that Christian, they would have a guilty conscience because that meat is special. That idol is something in their mind. So that's what the church in Corinth was asking Paul. The book of 1 Corinthians is a response to several questions being asked. And we can kind of reverse engineer from the book and work from the responses and work backwards and figure out the questions that were asked. And one of the questions touched meat, Christians eating meat that was offered to idols. Now, I'm going to reiterate verse 4. Concerning the eating of the things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and there is no other capital G God but one. Verse 5, for even if there are so-called gods, lowercase g, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and the Lord Jesus Christ, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. Folks, he's talking about Christians. He ain't comparing Christians to the world. He's talking about in Christendom, in the first century, in Christianity, there were people who believed that Zeus and Hera and Hercules and Hades and Ares, all of these were real. You just couldn't worship them because God said not to. The capital G God. So they believed this. And evidently they were right in the eyes of God. They were in a covenant relationship with God through Christ, even holding that belief. That belief was not enough to remove fellowship from God. Verse 7, however, there is not in every one that knowledge, for some with consciousness of the idol until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So they're following your example, but they're violating their conscience. You're causing them to violate the law. And Paul goes on to say, therefore, if food makes my brother to stumble, I will never again eat meat lest I make my brother stumble. Now that was a hyperbolic statement, but it's generally true. That's what Paul felt. Now that doesn't mean that if somebody has an issue of conscience with something we're doing, that they can exert their force on us and through tyranny impose their will on ours. That's called the tyranny of the weaker brother. But that's not the topic of discussion. I want to talk about the henotheism. These people believed that there were a pantheon of gods, but they worshiped the superior God. Question: if you knew somebody like that, if you studied with somebody like that, would you think that that disqualifies them, that belief disqualifies them from being in fellowship with God? I've been told that everybody in the Church of Christ would withdraw fellowship over me and call me, or withdraw fellowship from me and call me a heretic if I taught that henotheism was an acceptable belief pattern, a frame of reference, worldview, and it didn't harm the text, and it didn't that it did not cause one to be out of fellowship with God because it did not deny the core tenets of the new covenant. I teach that. If you're a henotheist, if you believe that all these other gods are real, but you still serve the one true God, Jehovah, and you are in a covenant relationship with him through his son Jesus, and you've left ungodliness and worldly lust, and you now live soberly, righteously, godly, and you look for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ, if you walk in the light as he is in the light, but you believe all these other lowercase g gods exist, you're not in sin. I think you're wrong, but you're not in sin. You're not out of fellowship with God. Who in the world would think that? Well, a bunch of people think that, evidently. And that was that fella's reason. Like, that was the thing he went to. He said, because of that, you're in a denomination. And he cited Don Blackwell. Now, me and Don Blackwell have had problems in the past. But I don't care what Don Blackwell thinks about my relationship with God. And it's really unfair to Don Blackwell that I'm even mentioning him now, because he's got no dog in this race. This one fella and me is the one that was talking about this years ago. And he's the one that threw up Don Blackwell. I'm like, I don't know what Don Blackwell believes about henotheism. If he believes that a henotheistic worldview is enough to cause one to burn for eternity in hell, he's wrong. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 proves that. There were practicing henotheists in Corinth, and Paul said they're brothers and you need not to cause them to stumble. He didn't identify them as henotheists because that term had not been coined. It won't have been coined for a couple thousand years. It's a fairly new term. But a henotheist, let me see if I can get you a better definition than simply what I'm saying. Henotheism, meaning. Henotheism is the adherence to one particular god out of several, especially by a family, tribe, or other group. Now, that is stripped of nuance. Let me give you the Wikipedia definition. And as I told the guys last night, Wikipedia is not a scholarly source, but Wikipedia is really good for validating general information. And so it's just understand that I'm not saying that you need to listen to me because I'm some kind of scholarly authority. I'm just a guy that's read some scholarly books, and I'm going to read you the definition of henotheism as Wikipedia defines. Henotheism is the worship of a single supreme God that does not deny the existence or possible existence of other deities that may be worshipped. Frederick Schelling, 1775 to 1854, coined the word, and Frederick Welker, 1784 to 1876, used it to depict primitive monotheism among ancient Greeks. Do you understand why these scholars use this word to depict primitive monotheism among ancient Greeks? Because the switch on the world scene from a polytheistic worldview to a monotheistic worldview, there was some overlap, and there would have been people holding on to the polytheistic worldview, and the compromise, the mental compromise they would have made is, well, all of these pantheon of gods have to be real because we've worshipped them all of our lives. But we know we know the one true God, and He's supreme, so we're gonna worship Him. That's a perfectly logical compromise mentally. It doesn't mean you're right, but it also doesn't mean that you're that your wrongness also doesn't cause you to be rebellious against God. That's it. All right. Max Muller, 1823 to 1900, a British philologist. I am the very model of a biblical philologist. Anyway, philologist is a branch of knowledge that deals with the structure, historical development, and relationship of language or languages. So Max Muller is a philologist and Orientalist. He brought the term into wider usage in his scholarship on the Indian religions, particularly Hinduism, whose scriptures mention and praise numerous deities as if they are one ultimate unitary divine essence. Muller made the term central to his criticism of Western theological and religious exceptionalism relative to Eastern religions, focusing on a cultural dogma which held monotheism to be both fundamentally well-defined and inherently superior to the differing concepts of God. So listen, I'm not a tree-hugging hippie. I'm not a change agent. I'm just a recognizer of truth. And I think Max Muller was a little bit validated in his criticism. Yes, look, monotheism is inherently superior, period. That is not a cultural dogma. That is what the monotheistic God teaches. Muller was criticizing Western theological and religious exceptionalism. In other words, the Christian religion is better, it's exceptional than all the other religions. The Eastern religions, being henotheistic, does not make them equal with a monotheistic understanding of Jehovah God. And that's just all there is to it. All right, let me get back here to the comment sections. Hopefully we've got some comments, questions, observations. All right. Have no other gods before me, Deuteronomy 5:7, Exodus 20:30. Could that concept not be derived from these verses, whether you attribute this to other entities or idols being lifted up as gods or not? Absolutely, that yes. I do believe that whenever the Israelites went and conquered the Perizzites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Philistines, all of these nations, they still believe, their concept was that each city had its sovereign God, and whenever, like for instance, Agamemnon, King Agamemnon, I can't remember, I think it was Apollo that was his sovereign God. But which, y'all, go back and look at that story. Whenever Troy and Greece fought, those armies were conceptualizing that this was, I think it was Apollo and somebody else fighting. And I can't remember the two sovereign gods. But like the Philistines, whenever the children of Israel defeated the Philistines, they conceptualized that as if Jehovah God defeated Dagon, the sovereign god of the Philistines. So, anyway. I don't think God was so tyrannical. I don't think Jehovah God was so tyrannical that in order for the survivors of these nations, if any of them survived, they could become proselytes, and they could just understand that, listen, we're following this Jehovah God, but Our God is still existential, but we're not going to worship him anymore because he was defeated by this more powerful God. I think that's a perfectly fine way of conceptualizing that, Ben Grady. Emily John says, thank you, Lord, for the youth ushers. It's good to have a congregation big enough that you need ushers. All right, I don't see any more questions per se. So yeah, you have no other gods before me. I think that was God's way of saying, look, I'm not going to control. Oh man, that vacuum cleaner's loud. I told her it would be okay, but that's really loud. I may have to end this early. Ooh. Hold on a second. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. Have no other gods before me, Deuteronomy 5:7, Exodus 20:30. I think that was God's way of saying, look, I'm not going to micromanage your psyche. I'm Jehovah God. There is no other God before me. If you worship me and you give me the homage and you submit your will to my will, you've got this licked. I think that's as simple as that. Hello, Debbie Rose. Good to see you. Glad you've come in. We're a little bit late getting started today, so I don't know. Our normal crowd of questioners, you gotta get them on time because they watch. I think they watch somebody before I come on, and they watch somebody after I come on. So if I'm late, I miss my crowd. Oh, that's cool. Hey, Alabama says we can't hear the vacuum. Gotcha. Well, that means that I've got my sound system set up, and I've got a noise gate and an expander, because you never know what kind of noise is going to filter through, and that means that I've got it set up right. Y'all, I'm so ready for this hat to break in. It's bothering me. It's not sitting right on my head, and once it breaks in, it'll sit right on my head. Well, I'm really done with the material that I had planned. Usually by this time, we have a whole lot of questions. And that's what takes us through for the rest of the hour. I have no problem stopping early. I don't think a fella should just keep rambling to fill time. I will say this, follow us on Rumble. I'm going to do some housekeeping stuff until we get some more questions, and if we don't get any more questions, we'll stop her a little early. All right, let me do this. My channels, I am Christianity Now. If you'll go to Rumble, cool beans, Debbie Rose. Thank you so much. And y'all, I got such a weird conscience. I wasn't saying, hey, unless you get somebody here to ask questions, we're going to stop. I'm just saying I've run out of stuff that I prepared to say. So that's all I'm saying. I ain't threatening you, I promise. So there's a link I just put in the comment section. If you go to there, you'll find that Rumble channel. There's some interesting stuff on it, but I'm going to start uploading edited down versions of these live streams, because the last two I put over there did pretty good on Rumble. So yeah, that was awesome. In fact, I'm going to set this up. Captions. I want to add one. Follow us on Rumble. Exclamation, exclamation. Secondary text. Paste. Rumble.com. Now looky there. Follow us on Rumble. Rumble.com. Just go to Christianity. Go to Rumble and search Christianity Now. I'm very impressed with what Rumble. Like I said, it just a very few views overnight actually netted monetary return. Eat your heart out, YouTube. We still want to try to grow the YouTube. We're still going to be on YouTube. So for those of you that listen there, and we got several of you in today from YouTube. If you're watching and listening from the YouTube, why don't you put a comment in the comment section and say, "Hey, I'm on YouTube," or something to that effect. I feel like there was some. To build on the conversation that we've had about talking to these guys that are henotheists. One of them is, there's three of them now. We picked up one, and one of them, not the newest one, but the other guy, he's not a henotheist. He's actually an atheist. I don't believe he believes that everything is true from all the pantheons of gods. But I think he's the one that's really starting to click with most, because the other guy asked some questions and he answered it, and he answered from information that he learned from me. And that makes me proud. That means he's learning, he's paying attention, and he's buying in. He's at least considering what I'm saying is reasonable and correct from my worldview, even if he doesn't believe my worldview. Y'all, that's progress. This is how you don't sit down with the Bible and beat somebody into submission. You show them who Jesus is what you do. Emma Hart, set our mind on Christ alone. Endeavor to know nothing but Christ and Him crucified. Follow us on Rumble, rumble.com/C/Christianity Now. Deborah O'Neill, I'm here. And on the Christianity page and YouTube. That's awesome. And Diana Harden is on YouTube. That's awesome. Y'all, 30 seconds is a pretty long time on a live stream. Y'all commented that when I said something, but there was such a delay. Awesome. Glory, Emma Hart. Glory. Diana Harden says YouTube. And then, boom, I know that y'all won't be able to see all this, but it highlights it where I can read it. Some lifted up the fathers that outlived their children as gods. Nimrod was apparently lifted up as a god and became known as the man of many names, many of which God... There's a typo here. I'm going to read it exactly like it sounds, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody. Normally, my little artificial intelligence algorithm in my brain can edit as I read and translate as I read, but I can't, I'm pulling up a blank here. So I'm just going to read it as it is. Nimrod was apparently lifted up as a god and became known as the man of many names, many of which God back to him but are considered a god. Babel and the language change may be the source. Some lift up lesser entities as gods, like some worship Satan. So could some lesser entities be legitimate powers, but obviously lesser as they are created as well, that are lifted up as gods, that is. Yes, if I'm tracking, yes, that whenever an entity differentiates itself from the masses have to have an explanation. So they say this entity is exceptional in some way. Well, a few thousand years ago, what would be the easiest explanation for that exceptionalness? He's deity. There's just something special about him. Think about how people speak about B.J. Clark or Dan Winkler. And I think B.J. Clark and Dan Winkler are wonderful orators for different reasons. Dan Winkler is probably the greatest expositor of our age. B.J. Clark is the greatest orator as far as just speaker of our age, I think. They're just human beings. As talented as they are, as hard as they've worked to cultivate that talent and grow that skill, they're not exceptional when it comes to just baseline humanity. They're exceptional in their will. They worked hard. That doesn't make them deity. That doesn't make them better than anybody else. That doesn't make them categorically better than their contemporaries of humanity. So yeah, we shouldn't elevate them in that way. We should pull that principle from Romans chapter 13 I'll read it here. Romans chapter 13, you got to give, well, I'm going to read it because I never get it right. Where are we at? All right. Romans 13. Yeah, therefore you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually this very thing. Render therefore all their due. So specifically, this is talking about taxes in the government. But there's a general principle at work here. Render therefore to everybody their due. Taxes to whom taxes are due. Customs to whom customs. Fear to whom fear. Honor to whom honor. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves another is one another fulfilled the law. So I want you to give honor to these very exceptional human beings as it's needed, as it's required, but don't elevate them to the status of God or demigod. That's the point I'm making. All right. Got you, Ben. That makes sense. Yeah. Those names, God attributed those names back to him in many cases, I think is what you were saying. And then Debbie Rose, people seem to want to believe in a God, even if he isn't the one true God. Example, look at the Egyptians. Yes, that's why Blaise Pascal talked about the God-shaped hole in the heart of every man. And in fact, going to the book of Acts, chapter 17, listen to it. God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. Whenever I teach this sermon on Mars Hill, I teach 6 logical arguments for the existence of God. One of them is the argument from religion, which is elucidated right here in this sermon. Mankind wants to serve something larger than himself. Mankind, I believe, is hardwired, and we're not hardwired for very much, folks, but we're hardwired to look for deeper meaning, to look for a larger vantage point, to look for something outside of our own existence. And the fact that there are cultures, every single culture that has ever come about on the face of the earth has had mythos to explain the cosmos. All right. Sorry for the typos. I prepared a lesson on idols recently and found myself bothered by some of my own statements as I made statements that stripped the nuance out of the idolatry. God bless you, Ben Grady. I was there some years ago. Like saying something attributing all gods as just statues made of silver, gold, or wood, or stone, etc. But I think there's more nuance, so I've been kind of pondering all this. Absolutely. The way that go back in Isaiah and look at the ridicule that look at the speech to ridicule those idols that God uses. But he's doing that to show the ridiculousness of it. But that's not what those people thought. There was a statue of Dagon in the Philistine in the Philistine city, a temple. I just forgot how to convey information. In the Philistine city, there's a temple, and in that temple is a statue of Dagon. They know that that's not Dagon. Dagon lives somewhere else. That's a representative of Dagon. That's a cultural center where people can focus on Dagon. That's what sets Christianity apart. We don't believe that our God can be located in one centralized location. We don't believe that our God can, it's foolish to try to represent our God with something that our God created. That's the idea. Our God can coalesce and express himself at a point in time. Our God can take up on flesh. Our God can be made of flesh and dwell among us, and we can behold his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Christianity is exceptional that way. But it's the height of foolishness, it's the height of ridiculousness to chop down a tree, from the same tree build a weapon to sacrifice an animal, build a fire to cook the animal and offer the sacrifice, build a statue in representation of our God that we worship while we're using the fire for heat, the meat for food, the meat for a sacrifice. It all come from God. It's the height of foolishness. That's what Isaiah is talking about. So yes, the nuance is stripped from it. But those people didn't conceptualize that carved statue as a god. They revered it because of the image of it. You know, there's people that know that this wood pulp and bonded leather, that there's nothing holy about that, but this is now the Word of God, because this is a compendium of the books of the New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs. And so you kind of revere that a little bit. I'm not just going to throw that around. I'm not going to leave it somewhere. I'm going to take care of it more so than I might another book. But I don't think that that's God, if that makes any sense. Anyway, all of that to say, Ben, I agree with you. All right. What do you think about the bishop preaching to Trump the other day? Are we as Christians to call her a bishop? Example, if you were on the newscast, would you say bishop whoever? That's a good question, Rusty. I don't know if I think I would call her so-called bishop. I think I would, for the sake of clarity, I would have to refer to her as Bishop Buddy or something. But I would say, yes, you know, Miss Buddy, so-called bishop of the blank blank church. Here's what she said, and this is an affront to God. I think that's how I would handle it. I don't think, because I recall the story where I met this guy at a grocery store in the marketplace, and he said he liked my hat. I was wearing a flat cap from Ireland at the time, and he shook my hand and said, "I like your hat. I'm Pastor Jim," or whatever his name was, and I said, "Well, I'm Tony. It's nice to meet you, Jim." And he said, "Well, it's Pastor Jim." And I just smiled, and I said, "No." I said, "You understand, we're literally here in the marketplace, and you're insisting on a title. You need to go read Matthew 23. I wouldn't use his title. I wouldn't use her title respectfully and reverently. I would use her title only in so much as I needed to use her title for clarity's sake. But I think I would mitigate it by saying so-called, because she is not a bishop. She's not the husband of one wife. And in fact, it's not the husband of one wife. The way it's written in the Greek is one woman's man, or a man that is possessed by one woman. It actually doesn't say marriage. It actually doesn't say husband of one wife. It says one man's woman. No, one woman's man. A bishop has to be one woman's man. Is that woman one woman's man? No. Okay, she's not a bishop. So I'll call her so-called, Bishop so-called, Buddy Everett, whatever his name is, Buddy Holly, I don't know, her name. Hey, Alabama says, I wouldn't call her anything religiously related. I'd call her by her last name like anyone else, Miss or Mrs. and the last name. Yeah, and listen, that's my go-to, unless like I'm on a news program and I need to make sure that I'm identifying her so that the most amount of people will recognize that I'm talking about her on the news program. So I might say, Bishop Smith so-called. I'm not trying to govern your conscience, hey, Alabama, at all. My conscience would be okay with saying, Bishop Smith so-called. Well, if this Bishop Smith so-called thinks that she's a bishop, she's got a problem with the Apostle Paul. I wouldn't have any problem uttering that. And I thank you so much for all of the folks who have shared this. Guys, unless I get any more questions before I end my sign-off, I think it's a good stopping point. I've enjoyed the show so much. Here's the thing. The gentleman that I'm talking to on this phone, on this game chat, I'm hoping that they see this, because what I'm about to say, I can't really say to them, but I would love for them to hear it. I am learning so much and and developing skills. Almost said perfecting. That felt really arrogant. I am exercising and honing a skill in apologetics. How do you convince somebody who is an atheist of the exceptional nature of the Christian religion? Y'all, it's a challenge, but I am so thankful. I'm so thankful that these guys ask me these questions, and they're willing to converse with me, and they're willing to hear me say extremely oppositional ideals to their own. And they're respectful about it. We're respectful to one another. I'm thankful for that. And I'm better off because of it. Anyway, can't really tell them that. It'd get too sappy. Yeah. Hey, Alabama says, I see different situations, different use of the term. I think so. I think so. And again, here's the thing. It's really easy to say, to have a good understanding of what you're going to do before you're in the situation. Once I get in that situation, if I actually was on, if I was actually invited on Piers Morgan to talk about it, would I say Bishop so-and-so so-called? I don't know. I may refuse to call her a bishop. Sitting in this chair, I think that I would just say, Bishop so-called, Mrs. Smith thinks she's a bishop, and Paul said, so I don't know. That's a good one. Should Christians call it St. Patrick's Day? Yeah, I think Jesus used accommodative language. Let me explain what I mean by that. I don't know how this is going to read in the New King James, but at the risk of me looking silly, let's go to John chapter 4, and I'm going to read something in the New King James where Jesus uses accommodative language. Here's the thing. If I don't like the way my wife cooks biscuits, so I divorce her and I go marry somebody else, I haven't had two wives. I've only ever had one wife, and there's one woman I'm living with in adultery that's not my wife. But if somebody says, Tony, are you married? Yes, I'm married. So you have a wife? Yes, I have a wife. The person might say, well, actually, I am married. Hold on a second. Forget I've said. Let's just let Jesus do this. He's so much better than I am. John 4. Hold on a second. I'm going to start reading in verse 7. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink of me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you don't have anything to draw with, and the well's deep. Where do you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whosoever drinks of the water that I give him will never thirst. The woman said, I want some of this water. I don't want to come here to draw. And he said, go call your husband to come here. The woman said, well, I don't have a husband. Now, Jesus said, go call your husband. He knew that wasn't her husband, but he called it her husband. And there was something about Jesus that communicated that he knew the truth, that she didn't go along with the farce, with the ruse. So she said, well, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, well, it's good that you said that, because you've actually had 5 husbands, and none of the husbands you've had, and the husband you have now ain't your husband. See, all that's accommodative language. So he said, you have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband, in that you spoke truly. The woman said to him, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Now here's the thing. Here's how we know this is accommodative language. Jesus said, you've had 5 husbands. Okay. You cannot have 5 husbands unless they all die and the next of kin marries you. That was the culture of the day. If it was the case that this woman's first husband died, next of kin. So first husband died, next of kin married, next of kin dies, next of kin, next of kin dies, next of kin, and then he dies, and then the next of kin takes up the woman. That would still be in God's eyes a ordained marriage. But evidently that didn't happen here, because she has no legal right or spiritual right to be married to the man she's currently with. And I think this is an example of Jesus using accommodative language. He was tweaking with the definition of the word husband. So I have no issue of conscience using the phrase St. Patrick's Day when I know that St. Patrick is only a saint in the eyes of the Catholic Church. But I have no issue of conscience using that term. You may. I don't control your conscience, but you don't control mine either. So that's how we all get along. All right. Let me get this. It's a long one, and this may be the last comment because I do got to go. All right. This is an interesting story. Let me get it right and read it. According to Jewish tradition, Abraham's father, Terah, made and sold idols. When Abraham was a young boy, he questioned the legitimacy of these idols and decided to take action. One day while Terah was away, Abraham took a hammer and smashed all the idols in the shop except for the largest one. He then placed the hammer in the hand of the largest idol. When Terah returned and discovered the chaos, he asked Abraham what had happened. Abram explained that a woman had come to make an offering to the idols, and they had argued about which one should eat first. The largest idol had then taken the hammer and smashed the others. Terah, realizing the absurdity of his claim, acknowledged that the idols were merely statues and had no power. This story highlights Abraham's early rejection of idolatry and eventual role in promoting monotheism. Ben, that reminds me of the story of Bel in the Apocrypha. Let me see if I can do a rundown of this real quick. Hold on. I just need a summary so I can. Can you give me a... Let me see if this, okay. Oh, the apocryphal story of Bel and the dragon. Will this be a sum? Okay, so the first narrative, the idol Bel. The first narrative involves the Babylonian idol Bel, which was worshipped as a god. The priest of Bel claimed the idol consumed vast quantities of food and drink each day, which the king also believed. Daniel denied Bel's divinity and sought to prove it was a deception. To expose the fraud, Danielson secretly sprinkled ashes on the temple floor before the food and drink were placed before the idol. The next morning, the footprints of the priest and their families were visible in the ashes, revealing they had entered through hidden passages to consume the offerings themselves. The king, enraged by the deception, executed the priest and destroyed the idol and its temple. So yeah, that story that you said, it has the ring of the truth that would be associated with an apocryphal story, like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. An apocryphal story would be John Henry, who was a steel driving man. A lot of the folk tales from the Americas, Johnny Appleseed, although Johnny Appleseed was a true, was an actual character in history, just like John Henry, the stories surrounding them have reached the level of American mythos. Ben, I appreciate your contributions today. Thank you. And I appreciate the contributions of everyone. Now, I want you to help me grow Christianity Now to 1 million followers. The best way for you to do that is go to my Facebook page, Tony Brewer. It's my personal Facebook page. It's crazy. They have me monetized over there. Go like and share and everything. Go to Rumble. Go to Rumble and follow us on Rumble. We've already had a monetary return on our time investment by uploading to Rumble. We're going to continue to do that. We're not leaving YouTube, but we're going to also add Rumble. Follow us on Rumble, Christianity Now. We've got 14 subscribers on Rumble already. See if we can make it 20 by the end of the day. See if we make it 100. Do you think you can? I think we need to have a giveaway to promote the Rumble. Maybe I can get a hold of another Bible. We can do a really nice Bible giveaway. Something that would really spur people to action. All right, that's all I've got, folks. God bless every one of you. This has been Tony Brewer with Christianity Now, Cogitations, Free for All Friday. Thank you. And we'll tune back in at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on Monday. I look forward to it. Keep hanging around the Facebook page, Tony Brewer. Check that Rumble stuff. I'm going to be pretty active all weekend. I've got to touch base with Aaron and see if he's going to be writing any articles for Saturday and Sunday. If not, I may fill that role while he's on hiatus. Other than that, if you want to help us out and you want to support us and you want to make sure we're successful because you like what we do, you can help us monetarily. Go to the show notes, or you can go to the Tony Brewer Facebook page and just interact with everything and invite people to be following it and stuff like that. Thank you so much. God bless you. Lana Rose, thank you. Annie Rose, thank you. I wonder if y'all are sisters. All right. God bless every one of you, and we'll catch you on the flip side.